Hello and welcome, friends. There are a lot of new friends around here, so hi, welcome. We don't always roast things. Sometimes we just sit here and do little random historical inspired craft things, and that is precisely what we are going to be doing today because I have a lot of presents to wrap. In an effort to get through some of the extraordinary amount of cabbage that I have in my life, I'm going to be wrapping some presents out of cabbage. I know a lot of you are always asking me about things that can be done with cabbage. Cabbage, by the way, if you're new around here, is the historical term for scrap fabric. So it's just, a term that we see in historical documents by tailors and dressmakers and mantua makers, referring to the off-cut scraps of fabric that people would make other stuff out of. Cabbage. Today, we are wrapping some gifts out of cabbage. I'm hoping you too have some gifts that need wrapping and can join me on these cabbage wrapping endeavors. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and pull out any bits of cabbage that I think are large enough to use as wrapping. I have my pile of gifts here just under this cloth. I'm not going to actually be showing the gifts because the people who will be receiving these gifts will also probably be watching this video, so no spoilers. I'm hoping there's going to be large enough sized cabbage. If not, we're just going to have to do some piecing. I'm probably going to end up sewing stuff together because that's how I roll. Okay, this might be a potential bit of cabbage. This one's definitely nicely sized. I also seem to have a lot of long strips of cabbage, which I actually might use as ribbons or things to tie, so going to pull these out as well. Is it socially acceptable to wrap a gift out of a destructed mock-up? I think I might give it a go. I do have some nice red death scraps in here, which I'm actually going to pull out because maybe I will make some nice bows or decorations out of this. Okay, so I have my pile of potentially usable cabbage, pile of nice potential decoration cabbage, some fabric shears, which will be obviously useful for cutting things. I also have some basting thread as well as scraps of basting thread that I have pulled out of another project the other day. I have a feeling that we'll end up sewing some stuff. I could just pin fabric together, however, I am at the moment a bit low on pins and I don't want to risk not getting them back. Extremely labor consuming. I'm not sure that I really care because I am procrastinating doing more important things right now, can you tell? So I put out a little post on the Instagram because I knew I was going to be doing this little crafty video. We probably need something to entertain you with whilst I do this. And of course a lot of people replied with questions about fabric, which I thought, oh, how perfect, because we are effectively doing stuff with fabric right now. Also, weirdly, a lot of questions about what can you do with cabbage? So I guess we're doing all of the things right now. So one of the questions that I get very, very frequently is, are there any good resources for historically accurate materials, for natural fiber materials, or where to buy fabric online? However, I must point out that I am not a good resource for providing online fabric resources because most of the fabric that I purchase is from 39th Street in the Garment District here in New York City. So I don't actually do a whole lot of online fabric shopping. So there are probably people out there in the world who know a lot more about this than I do and are a lot more qualified to be answering this question than I am. I do not have a thimble. BRB. There are a couple of resources, however, that I do use for specialized historical-ish materials. So, for example, linens are very difficult to find. Linen in general is not difficult to find, but linen that sort of vaguely emulates the quality of historical linen, which, I mean, nothing today really does, but some things can come a little bit close. One of the places that I go to in New York they used to be on 39th Street, Gray Lines Linen, I actually discover have an online shop, so they are a good resource for purchasing linen. If I have to go online and purchase fabric, most of the time it's from Burnley and Trowbridge though. Burnley and Trowbridge do carry linen, they carry fantastic linen. They also carry silks and wools and basically all those natural fiber historically accurate materials that one could desire. So highly recommend checking out Burnley and Trowbridge. There's another source, they're called Renaissance Fabrics. I've never ordered from them. However, I do know, I see their name thrown around a lot. I know a lot of people do order from them, and I think they specialize in, at least they set aside natural fiber materials that they then recommend to people who are using these for historical reproductions. I could just be making that up based on rumor and hearsay, so don't quote me on that. However, I do know a lot of historical costumers use them, so they are a decent resource for that kind of thing as well. Okay, but like, how do you even know what sort of fabric to even vaguely go to look for if you know absolutely nothing about fabric? I mean, as we probably all know, the fabric that you choose is probably one of the most important decisions that you make when working on a sewing project, because the wrong fabric can, no matter how good your sewing skill is, well, I mean, obviously if you're like a master tailor, you can probably work with poly chiffon and make something fantastic. But generally, especially if you're just starting off, working with the wrong fabric is only just going to shoot you in the foot more, because inevitably the garment is just not going to sit nicely, which then you can perceive will reflect badly on your work, even though kind of it maybe has nothing to do with your work and everything to do with picking the wrong fabric. So choosing the right fabric, I think, is super, super important. One of the most important decisions you can make whilst working on a project. And I mean, it becomes a sort of dilemma of, do you want to spend more on a good quality fabric that will produce a better quality garment, or do you want to buy something cheap and inexpensive and risk making something that will not necessarily turn out the way you want it and will not necessarily be wearable? There are pros and cons. Obviously, if you are just trying to practice your sewing skill and don't want to waste money on really nice fabric, then yes, there is an argument for buying cheap stuff and just using that as practice. However, personally, I think I have just made enough mistakes with synthetic fabric and ended up with garments that were just completely useless to me to find that worth the savings, if that makes sense. Obviously, if you want to make a lot of stuff and you want to do a lot of sewing, investing in really good quality material is not necessarily an option, because that adds up very quickly. However, it depends on the pace that you work. So when I was first starting out with historical sewing, I was making like one garment every 6 months. So I could save up the money to buy really nice quality material, because I'm only spending what others would spend on 3 projects on one project that would take the same amount of time as those 3 projects, but would be something that I put a lot of time and effort into, and that would ideally come out nice enough quality for me to eventually wear. A lot of people did ask in the Instagram, where do you find affordable, historically accurate fabrics? The word affordable is relative, and I'm not entirely sure what people mean by affordable, because obviously here in New York City, I mean, yes, the city in general is more expensive. However, I think our fabric generally runs cheaper than, you know, a fabric store in a small town that doesn't necessarily have the same amount of competition. You know, here in the garment district, we've got a whole street lined with independent small fabric shops, so they have to compete. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure what is meant by that. However, you know, I could go down to the garment district and get some cotton for $5 a yard or $7 a yard, which I think is extraordinarily affordable, especially with cottons and linens that can be produced quite cheaply. It's the wools and the silks, obviously, that start getting a bit pricey. I have in the past, when I do want a nice wool, or at least when the historically accurate garment required wool, but I didn't necessarily have the budget to be paying $40 a yard for 11 yards of material, I did compromise and get a synthetic blend. So that way I had a little bit of the wool behavior and quality, but it was a little bit more affordable. Obviously, I still have regrets about it, because there is still that, just like there is the wool quality to it, there's also the synthetic quality to it, so it's not like the best garment that I could have made, but you know, it was what I could afford at the time. So sometimes you do just have to make compromises, especially with projects that, yes, you may do one project every 6 months, but if it's a project that requires 35 yards of silk for a trained bustle gown or something, then sometimes you just have to make concessions. And I mean, especially with silks, I feel like silks are much more easy to fake, because there can be some really good quality synthetic silks out there. Marika's gown for Costume College, the Constellation gown that she made a video series on, I shall link down below. First of all, it was beautiful, but it was made of synthetic silk, I think. You wouldn't really know the difference. The only issue with using synthetics is the whole like waste disposal of the synthetics, because synthetic polyester fabric is plastic. So you do kind of have to be very careful about where your scraps are going. Probably best not to throw them in the trash, because that ends up in landfills, and plastic takes like 1,000 years to go away. Saving all of your scraps of cabbage and using them for something productive, whether it's pillow stuffing or gift wrapping, which then probably shouldn't be thrown away, but whatever you reuse it for, I mean, if you do find useful reuses for it that don't involve sending it to landfill, like, that's productive and that's fine. I don't mean to like shame anyone for needing to use synthetic materials, because budgetary constraints are very real. Costuming or clothes making should not be an elitist hobby or skill. It just requires an extra level of vigilance of you know, where your materials are going, how you are controlling the waste. Again, I'm not meaning to shame anyone for using synthetic things or mass-produced things or unethically manufactured things. The reason we do this is because most of the time we just don't know, we're not aware. We just are not trained to think about the repercussions of the things that we cast off or the things that we use or how the things that we use are manufactured. So just being aware of it and being conscious of it and sort of controlling what you throw away and what you buy is like an enormous first step. Kind of on that same sustainability note, a lot of people were asking about my philosophy on like veganism and vegan materials. Personally, I am not vegan. I am vegetarian, but that's like irrelevant. You do run into the issue of when you are trying to work historically or sustainably, you have to, I mean, inevitably, natural fiber materials are the best materials to use. However, it does also involve the use of animal products, and how does one stick to one's vegan beliefs whilst also operating sustainably and or historically accurately. So products like wool and like silk, and even things like beeswax, which I guess is an animal insect material as well. How do you get around that? Oh, and fur. Oh, if we want to get really controversial, we can talk about fur. It is a really tricky subject, and do feel free to have educated debates down in the comments. Let's try not to shame people for like having opinions, especially if they're backed up with evidence and are well thought out. Because yeah, there is the issue of historically, people did not necessarily have these veganistic beliefs because there kind of wasn't really a need to. We weren't over-exploiting like the animal population the way that we are today with the way that our society operates. So that is an issue, and for some instances there just aren't historically accurate, vegan, appropriate methods. Some of the alternatives that we have today are chemically produced, which brings us to the issue of fur. Obviously, fur is a whole different story because it actually involves killing the animal, which obviously is not a good thing. We don't like things to die for us to have frivolous items of things. That being said, the synthetic alternatives to fur and to wool are very large chunks of loose plastic fiber, which is absolutely like the worst thing in the world for the environment, especially with synthetic fur, because it's literally like, you know, hairs of just plastic. When you're trying to cut that stuff, it's a nightmare. It gets everywhere, you breathe it in, it gets swept off out into the world, it gets flushed down into the water system. I can't even imagine the state of a manufacturing room that's working with faux fur. It must just be everywhere. I will not use fake fur for that reason. I'm also not pro the fur industry. Yeah, hold your attacks briefly for now. Personally, I don't see anything wrong with using vintage fur, something that has been dead for however many decades or hundreds of years, and that otherwise would either sit in a closet completely unused or would get thrown away. I don't see the purpose, the benefit in that. However, I am not for the unethical production of new fur. Obviously, if it's dead naturally, if you are like a forager and you find something on the side of the street and you're like, oh, the fur is nice, and you are brave enough to take the fur, or, you know, if it's part of like a cultural or traditional, you know, like Native American practice. There are certain native tribes, I know, like up in Alaska, who are legally permitted to hunt a certain number of whales per year and to keep the baleen, the whalebone, which otherwise to other people, that's completely illegal because it's part of their cultural tradition and they use the animal that they hunt. Like, that's biology, I guess. It's unfortunate because veganism does have a lot of really great ethos and philosophies to it. I do love the whole like sustainability philosophy behind it. However, it seems like some of the things just aren't thought through. I mean, feel free to express your own opinions on this matter if you so desire, but personally, I am of the belief that, I mean, there are certain natural fiber / animal materials that, when ethically maintained, do not necessarily harm the animal. Like, it becomes an issue when it becomes mass-produced and, I mean, abused, and they're not treated well, and they're basically, they exist purely for our benefit. That becomes an issue. However, I would not wear wool simply because it comes from an animal. The issue, I think, is less, it's an animal product, I must avoid it, so much as, is this ethically obtained? That does bring up the issue of, how do you know if something is ethically sourced and ethically obtained? Oftentimes you don't, because that is not a question that people are in the habit nowadays of asking, and so I think manufacturers are not in the habit of answering. So I am wary of a lot of the wools that exist on 39th Street. I mean, because of the element of competition there, none of them will disclose their manufacturers, none of them will disclose their sources, which becomes an issue on the part of the consumer because we need to know these sources in order to verify if they are ethically produced. So that is a bit of an issue. There are like well-known wool manufacturers like Harris Tweed that literally the whole ethos of their brand is the fact that the sheep are raised and maintained by independent farmers that work in one specific area of the world. All of the wools are treated and spun and dyed and made into cloth by independent weavers, independent textile manufacturers. These people use local materials and really know their craft and are really proud of their craft. So that's something that I am hugely interested in exploring more on this channel. It's a whole issue of how to find ethical, sustainable materials for an affordable price. Therein lies the endless conundrum of society, and this is not necessarily something that we have solved. This is not necessarily something we as individuals can solve. It's a massively widespread issue that is going to take time to solve. No one is necessarily at fault individually here, but it's not going to start being solved until we actually become aware of it and start asking questions. That is what I am endeavoring to do, even if I can't necessarily afford the best thing at the moment, or if I don't necessarily have the background information on something at the moment. The least I can do is start bringing up the questions. And buying less, right? Because that's always a solution. This one is for my friend Hannah, who has just started sewing, and so I think she might appreciate this nice hardy bit of cotton silesia for her future sewing projects. Okay, so the next question that a lot of people had is, how can you tell what the fiber content of a fabric is? Because sometimes they don't tell you in the store, or sometimes they're mislabeled, whether intentionally or unintentionally. As you probably saw if you saw the video where I was roasting that knockoff dress, which most of you probably did, considering that's why most of you are now here, you can actually, there's a burn test. You can burn the fabrics to find out how the different fiber types react to the fire, because that is a chemical process or something. Generally, I mean, do this safely. Do this over non-flammable materials and away from flammable objects and like near water and stuff, and like be sensible and be safe. Take a lighter or candle or something to just a very small edge of the scrap of fabric or something. So if you're going fabric shopping, you can often ask for a swatch of a fabric before you actually buy it. If it is synthetic, or if it's got synthetic blending in it, it will melt back into plastic and you'll have a hard plastic melted edge. You also have to pay attention to the smell, because natural fibers will smell like something. So if it's a wool, it will smell like burning hair, because that's what it is. If it's cotton, it will smell like burning paper, because plant fibers. If it's synthetic, it will smell like burning plastic, or it will smell like chemicals. Wool will also sort of smolder. It won't necessarily light up and then will turn into ash. Cotton will catch fire, so be careful if it's cotton, potentially, as will silk. So be cautious, be careful, be ready to drop something into a metal sink if necessary. I'm really quite pleased with how this particular parcel is coming out, so I think I need to go back and redo some of the other ones, because we're getting creative here, friends. This was not supposed to take time because I have so much else to be doing. However, here we are. I'm having a good time. Isn't that all that matters? Oh, it's cute! Okay, these ones need a bit more work. Maybe I should finish the other ones first. Also, maybe not. Gift wrapping is exhausting. I don't know how people do this normally. See, like, everyone I know is now in England, and my sibling is like the only person I actually usually gift to, except also most years we're just like, we're not doing gifts, right? Yeah, cool, because neither of us can be bothered. I feel like I'm the only person on the face of the planet who's like, doesn't like receiving gifts. Is that weird? I feel like just having stuff stresses me out so much, and when people feel obligated to get someone a thing, they don't necessarily buy something that that person really, truly, absolutely needs or can use, and it's just another object causing clutter and stress. Normally I'm just like, no, don't bother, because I will very much appreciate a very kind word rather than the stress of having to find a use for something that I don't need. Does that, like, is that weird? The good news is I, of course, get to see Kathy, and I know exactly. Kathy was too easy to shop for, because it's like, oh, Kathy would like this, and Kathy would like this, and Kathy would like this. The real question now is, what do I not get Kathy? Okay, I had to get a chair and change my mic battery because everything hurts. mean, I guess this is kind of turning into a Q&A. I know, like, everyone hates those. So do I. So, of course, a lot of people are asking about fast fashion and sustainability, and hopefully I mean, this is not a topic that can be addressed in one 20-minute video. A conversation that will continue to happen. Cesario, lots of questions about Cesario. His lordship is currently on holiday. He is not here because I'm leaving for England in 2 days, which is why everything is a mess right now. Cesario is living his best life in Philadelphia with my sibling, where he is lording it over their entire apartment, and he's very happy. So, why capes aren't in fashion anymore? Who said that? I still wear capes all the time, and they are very fabulous and fashionable if I do say so myself. So, wear your capes if you want to wear your capes. On that note, there were a couple of questions about history bounding, on how to have the confidence to wear what you want to wear, how do you start, how do you do all of that. I guess I could talk a little bit about history bounding and all of that fun stuff. I think in regards to the confidence aspect of it, the only trick to being able to wear hats or wear funny clothes or whatever it is that you are aspiring to do in life is to wear it as if it's a shirt. Like a t-shirt. I mean, maybe not a t-shirt because I'd feel really uncomfortable in a t-shirt outside. Wear it as if it's your normal clothes, and in order to do that, you kind of have to wear it enough that it does feel like your normal clothes. I'm not dressed weird, you're dressed weird. By the way, for anyone looking to get into history bounding, there is a Facebook group now for history bounders. So you should go and join that if you want some company in the world of history bounding, or some inspiration, or just some like motivation or validation of, hey, we're doing this thing and it's okay. The reality is, like, I mean, I think we have a perception that we think we're going to get a lot more reaction from the public than we actually do. We tend to invent a lot more negativity than actually occurs. You know, prepare yourself for the worst and all that, but in reality, I mean, there are a number of us who do it. I dress weird. I won't say I'm necessarily like 100% thoroughly historical. I do take modern liberties. I mean, history bounding, that's what it is. By the way, I mean, if you're new here and you actually don't know the term history bounding, which has only just recently come up within our lexicon of historical dress people, Morgan Donner actually was the one who coined this phrase. But I mean, the concept has been around for ages, but you know, it's just Morgan's like pinpointing a name to this concept. It suddenly just exploded. Everyone's now like, oh my God, this is exactly what we're doing. It comes from something else, but basically it's the concept of adapting sort of historically inspired elements of your wardrobe. I mean, in your everyday wardrobe. So I saw a brilliant post in the history bounding group by someone who went on Spoonflower, which is the site that like prints any fabric design you want, and she had printed a bunch of prints that are really iconic to Renaissance and Jacobean portraiture. All these prints that when you see them, you're like, oh my God, that's from this portrait of Queen Elizabeth. And she had them printed on fabric, and then she made them up into completely modern blouses. It was the most brilliant thing I'd seen. It made me really happy. But yeah, I mean, history bounding is whatever you want it to be for people who like historical dress, and to whatever degree that you're comfortable with. So if you're comfortable wearing frock coats, then that's fantastic, and go for it and absolutely do it. I mean, Kathy and I pretty much skew like borderline thoroughly Edwardian sometimes, especially when we're together and we're like off having adventures. But some people are like, I'm not doing the corset, I'm not wearing a corset in real life, I'm not wearing stays, or, you know, I can't take the long skirts. Whatever it is, you know, you take what you do like about the historical dress. Oh, I love the way that walking skirts are pleated up in the back, to give it that nice like swoosh just in the back. So then you take that idea and you chop the hem off, and then you have a skirt that you're comfortable with, but that also has those historical details that you also really love. So I wish you could curl fabric, because this one would look so nice if you could just put a stupid little curl on this bit. I mean, I could put wire in it. Oh no. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna let this be like a stupid thing. Hold on, this is requiring concentration. I am officially attempting to lace up a present. And this is cross-lacing, so this is not something that I'm like the most familiar with. Usually I work in the realm of spiral lacing. Kathy, this better make you laugh, like hysterically. I've just completely forgotten what I was talking about. Whoops. More Cesario content is all we want. I miss him so much. He's such a small little thing, but he's got so much personality. Pigs are the best. They're very like low maintenance, but also really wonderful friends. I mean, obviously, like, pigs are still work, all pets are work. Please don't go running out and buying pigs, expecting that they're just going to be pretty little floofs that run around and squeak all nicely, because they do still require a lot of maintenance and attention. I should also point out that not all pigs are like Cesario. Cesario is an unusually social and outgoing pig, purely because he is so used to my presence. We pretty much spend every waking hour in the same room. We talk to each other. We're very good friends. He gets so much attention. So he's very good with people, and he's especially very friendly with me. He has all of my apartments, so he likes to run around and explore. But mostly because guinea pigs are animals of prey. Usually they prefer to be hiding. It is their natural instinct to run and hide. So you have to sort of train them. Somebody says gatekeeping in the community. I just like so badly want everyone to like each other. And just to be nice to each other and be supportive and encouraging, because the world is so much more productive that way. The whole issue of gatekeeping and jealousy and just hostility within, amongst people on social media, on the internet, in life in general, it comes from a personal place in regards to that person's own personal life. It often has nothing to do with you. It often has nothing to do with your crafts, your skills, your ability, you as a person. It's wholly to do with that person's own issues, that person's own background and history and whatever. I can guarantee that if you want to do something awesome and somebody tells you not to do the thing, or you shouldn't be doing the thing because of these reasons, like if you do the thing anyway, more people are going to support you in your journey and your decision than, will oppose you. And if people are opposing you, I like to think that there are enough really, really wonderful people in this community that will jump to your defense if anything starts to get really nasty. Because especially if you are behaving in a civil and mature and educated, informed, productive manner, there's nothing in your situation to be opposed. And so I don't tolerate mistreatment whatsoever in a field where we are all just supposed to be having fun and learning stuff. This one, by the way, I'm not wrapping because it is already wrapped. I don't see the point in wrapping things that are already wrapped. This one's just getting some bows. It's like completely dark outside and it's like noon. I love winter. So my presents are now all wrapped. That was actually a lot of fun. I know there were a lot of questions on the Q&A thing about beginners, tips for beginners, that one question that I get like every single day of my life. I have kind of addressed in previous Q&As, but that I will probably have to do like a literal entire series on because there's so much. But if you want some basic sewing practice, wrap some presents and sew together your presents. It was really fun and productive and useful in terms of cabbage use, although to be quite honest, my cabbage patch still looks like it hasn't had a dent made in it. Sadly, I guess I shall just have to get some more friends. But anyway, I hope this was useful to you. I hope this wasn't too terribly cringy or boring or just like offensive, but enjoy your merry holiday season. Enjoy your present wrapping, if that is something that you are doing. And of course, I shall see you soon with more historical sewing adventures.